So it looks like we're live, PDN live for March of 2019, and today we're going to be talking about two-person armed defense and defending others, shooting in defense of others particularly, but generally working with others to defend them, or especially in the immediate aftermath of a defensive gun use. Now, for those of you not familiar with Personal Defense Network, it is, I think, the most comprehensive and high-quality collection of distance education, training videos, training articles available on the internet. We started putting this collection together in 2005. We produced over 100 DVDs, each an hour or more in length, and we worked with about 30 different world-class experts, contributors from all over the fields of security, safety, and of course, personal defense training, unarmed defense, knife defense, and a lot of firearms training. And the firearms training wasn't just my own programs from the combat focus shooting, from Valhalla training, from ICE training or the IDS program, DSF program, any of those. We've also had a lot of other people contribute to Personal Defense Network over the years, such as Mike Seeklander. He's one of the instructors that has been there. Andy Stanford's been there. I think about Tom Givens being in here as a contributor also. We've also had some legal experts and medical experts in there. For example, Caleb Causey, one of the guys that works with us on the Personal Defense Network training tour. So when you go to personaldefensenetwork.com, if this is your first time, maybe you saw something in social media, maybe you're watching us on YouTube and you're not actually watching on the Personal Defense website, when you get a chance, you go to personaldefensenetwork.com. I'm the executive director of PDN, Rob Pincus, and like I said, we've been doing this for about 15 years. We went online with our own website distribution in 2010. We added our premium level of membership in 2012, and just earlier today I actually did a private interactive session with our platinum membership, and gold membership of course lives between the premium and the platinum. So there's a lot of different advantages to being members, including access to exclusive events, whether they're live events or distance education classes, discounts on all our downloadable classes, and things like that. Now, of course, you can always come on as a visitor, search through videos, search through articles, and one of the cool things about the way this works is when you go look at the videos, you can just go through the all videos page, or you of course can use the search engine to find things. 121 pages. That's 121 pages of videos alone. Forget about the articles, the blogs, the online courses, and all of that. Because again, not only we produce all those DVDs and take some select chapters and highlighted information and turn them into clips for the website, we also have been producing content online, as I said, since 2010. So special clips developed just for this format, including our online classes. If you go to the training area, what you're going to see also, of course, is a list of the opportunities that come with the training tour. If I can wait that up, let me go over here for a second. I'll wait that up for us, and we'll look at the dates and locations of all the training classes. That'll be populated with all of the training courses next week. Next week is when we kick off the 2019 training tour, so you can learn more about that under the training tab at Personal Defense Network. Getting back to today's topic. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about two-person armed defense and defending others, and particularly shooting to defend others. When I put defending others into the search engine, which might be what you were going to do if I wasn't going to guide you through this process, if I just said go to Personal Defense Network and take a look at some of the things we've already talked about over the years when it comes to defending others. We have active shooter incident. I know we have at least a few questions already in the chat room coming up on active shooter incident stuff. Of course, you see the advertisement for today's live that you're watching now. We go into active shooter, how can we defend other people? And this is an article. Again, we have articles from a lot of different people. Also, shooting in defense of others, the downloadable DVD. We did an entire DVD down at my headquarters on the East Coast, Ancient City Shooting Range. And in fact, I think that's Chuck, the owner of Ancient City Shooting Range, in that little thumbnail defending me there. Active shooter training resources, again, the Shooting in Defense of Others DVD, which you can purchase or get as a download, and a lot of other important information that we've delivered over the years when it comes to this topic of defending others. But first, let's talk about the two-person armed defense class. The two-person armed defense class is really focusing on what to do if there's another good guy with a gun in the environment that you're working in when you have to pull your gun out. And that's either because you're about to have to defend yourself, or you did have to defend yourself, or maybe, as we were just talking about, you're going to be defending someone else in that public environment. And what happens when there's another good guy? Well, for years, we've talked about scanning, or we've talked about assessing the environment. And we talk a little bit about what you're supposed to be looking for. Most obviously, the first thing we're looking for is another threat. We talk about maybe law enforcement response. We talk about injuries. We talk about a lot of different things. But the emphasis really has always been on looking for that next threat, right? You'd hate to win a defensive gun use situation, you know, survive the fight, get through it, and then not pay attention to your surroundings and have that guy's buddy, you know, take you out from behind or tackle you, use your own gun again, whatever the scenario might be. That'd be like a you know, insult to the injury you already had from being in a defensive gun use, and then you believe you're victorious, and a second threat takes you out. Now, luckily, these situations are very, very rare. But needing to be aware of our environment, needing to be aware of our surroundings is not very, very rare. It's really, really important because we know the police are going to be showing up. There may be other bystanders. There may be medical issues you need to deal with. There may be just simply a better place for you to stand in the immediate aftermath of a defensive gun use than where you are. So the first thing we talk about in terms of coordinating with someone else is going to be to assess the environment. So let's talk about that for a second. I'm going to just kind of move all this around, give myself some space here, and kind of outline the things that we're looking for when we assess the environment. The first one is going to be other threats that are immediate, okay? This is someone you need to shoot. This is really an immediate threat. So I've dealt with the situation, whatever it is. I've drawn my gun. I've used it. I've come back in and start assessing. I'm confident that that threat is dealt with for the moment. I look over to the side and I immediately see someone that I need to shoot. They're threatening me or someone else immediately, so I'm going to engage it. That's what we normally think about with the imperative of the immediate aftermath. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, we could see another person that we have to shoot. So that's the first thing and most obvious thing. But the second thing is really important, and this is going to be getting to the crux of why we even have the two-person armed defense course in the program under ICE training, and is one of our frequently offered courses during the Personal Defense Network training tour. And this is someone you don't want to be hurt by. Someone you don't want to be hurt by. And you might say to me, well, Rob, isn't that exactly the same thing? And it's definitely not. Here's the thing. 30 years ago, right? If you go back to when I first started carrying concealed, I could carry concealed legally in Vermont because it was the first state with constitutional carry, and it was the only state with constitutional carry still at the time in 1990 when I moved there. And when I was carrying concealed, of course, Vermont is a very small population, relatively sparsely populated area. There were actually some state level, there wasn't a preemption at the state level, so inside of the state there were municipalities which barred you from carrying concealed under that state, what we now call constitutional carry, permitless carry. And Montpelier, which my college was near, and Burlington, where we spent a lot of free time and kind of where the big city near us was, and a couple other places, barred concealed carry. So carrying legally in Vermont really meant carrying in rural, sparse areas. So the issue of how many other people were carrying around you really wasn't that big a deal. In fact, if you look at a snapshot of the country going back 30 years ago, you'll see that there were probably at best maybe 2 million legal concealed carry permit holders. And sure, they were concentrated in certain areas, certain states where there was already shall issue laws or where concealed carry permits were relatively easy to get for one reason or another. So if you weren't in one of those areas, the chances of, even let's say you're an off-duty police officer and you're carrying a gun and you pull your gun out and use it, the chances of having another legally armed citizen with a gun around you was really, really slim. Now there are some asterisks on that. One of the asterisks would be, for example, New York City. Inside of New York City, there are tens of thousands of armed law enforcement officers. At the time, most of them were also going to be required to be armed when off duty. So you have tens of thousands of people in a very densely populated area, and it could be very common for firearms to come out and for either an off-duty or on-duty officer to have to deal with another on-duty or off-duty officer. And obviously the off-duty officers were at a severe disadvantage because of the situation of them potentially being dressed and looking like non-police officers. So what ends up happening is the New York City Police Department in the 1990s completely redoes the standardization of their training to make it less likely that they would have officer-on-officer situations. They started talking about carrying the badge in the left pocket. They started using very specific verbiage. They started really driving that very specific verbiage, so it wasn't stop, freeze, hold it, drop it. It was very specific verbiage that police officers would use, and there was a very specific response, like a little catechism that would go back and forth to avoid officer-involved shootings or off-duty officers being shot by on-duty officers primarily. So that community had a very unique situation at the time, going in the 80s and into the 90s, and they dealt with it very specifically. But when I look around the country, and when I've looked around the country over the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years since we first started developing the two-person armed defense program, what I'm seeing now is we have with Oklahoma, and of course these laws are going into effect this year, but with Oklahoma and Kentucky just in the last couple of weeks joining the ranks of the constitutional carry or permitless carry states, we now have to consider that every person who can legally own a gun, that is of age as dictated by these states, it's 21 for example in Oklahoma and West Virginia, anyone who can legally own that handgun might be carrying it concealed in public. So when we factor in all of the permits that are issued, which is 15 to 17,000, depending on, 15 to 17 million, depending on whose numbers you use, and all of the people who can legally own guns in the 16 now constitutional carry states, we get another 16 to 20 million, depending on whose numbers you use. So what are we talking about? 30 to 35 million people in the country, which again, go back 3 decades, 1 generation ago, and we had significantly less than 10% of that, right? Probably closer to 2 million. So what happens? It becomes more likely, especially in these areas where it's shall issue, or especially in the constitutional carry states. It's probably not going to happen in Massachusetts, in Boston, but in Western Massachusetts it might be more common. If we think about Arizona, or we think about Oklahoma, constitutional carry states, some areas of Colorado, for example, where I'm coming to you now, it is very plausible that there's going to be more than one armed good guy in an environment. We had a situation last year where we had 2 people who confronted what was considered an active shooter. He shot inside the restaurant at a couple people. He hit a couple family members. He came out of the restaurant and he was engaged by 2 armed civilians, people with concealed carry permits or people who had guns. I think one of them at least had a gun staged in his car, who engaged him independently of one another. It wasn't coordinated. When we start looking at these situations, we know that during active shooter events, we have situations where good guys or other police officers who weren't in uniform have been mistaken for bad guys. We had a very high profile situation in one of the suburbs of Chicago, was it early this year or late last year? It was late last year, where a security officer was holding someone at gunpoint. I think it was in physical contact with him, and was shot by a police officer. And it wasn't Chicago PD, it was a suburb. But again, this idea of not being aware that everyone with a gun isn't necessarily someone you need to shoot. So the first thing we're looking for when we assess is someone that we might not, and I say first, not like we're looking for that and then we go back and look for the other thing. The most important thing we could see when we're assessing the environment is someone we need to shoot immediately. But a very, 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 very close second is seeing someone who we don't want to get hurt by. And of course, go back fundamentally, as I said, for generations in the training environment, we've been talking about police response, right? And what happens when the police show up? You drop your gun, you show your hands, you cooperate, you comply, whatever words you want to use. So they, the police officers, are definitely in this category of someone we don't want to be hurt by and someone we don't need to shoot. So now let's add in this layer of complexity and chaos that comes with me looking over to my left and seeing someone with a firearm in their hand who's not wearing a uniform, not carrying a badge, not saying things that make me think they're a police officer or other armed professional, and yet they're also not doing anything that makes me think they need to be shot right away. Now, I know right away people are going to say, Rob, if I just had to shoot to defend my family and my family's there and I see somebody with a gun, I'm going to take him out because he represents a threat. He has opportunity and I can't read his mind. I don't know what he's up to, so I'm going to defend myself. Well, maybe, maybe not. But I contend that if you think about this ahead of time, you should be able to realize that looking over to your left, you're going to be able to tell a lot by body language, by ready position, for example. Is the gun out here like this with a finger on the trigger being pointed at a lot of people? Or is the gun held back in, or is it even in a stool? Or maybe even staged where the hand's on the gun's still in the holster, and the person's trying to figure out what's going on. Right? This person clearly, to me anyway, is not an immediate threat. They're a potential threat. I'm not going to dismiss them, but I don't need to shoot this person right away. I probably don't need to shoot this person right away. This person I may not actually need to shoot right away, but because of their poor training, their poor trigger discipline, and their kind of out of controlness of I don't know what's going on and the gun swinging around, I may shoot this person because they do represent an immediate threat, right? Somebody with their finger on the trigger with a gun at extension in a crowd looks like someone who's more likely to need to be shot. Now this is not that. Finger on the trigger, but confused look, and this person, do I want to yell at this person, hey, drop the gun, stop, right? Because I now may set off a flinch reaction, a grasp reflex. Do I want to startle them? No. So what am I going to do when I see someone that I don't want to be hurt by with a gun in their hand? Well, once I go through a couple of hoops in my brain, one of the things I might realize is that they're a potential ally. So we have a couple other things. You guys can do the research and take a look at the 4 things we talk about during assessment, not specifically part of this scenario, because we're talking about two-person armed defense. So we talk about two-person armed defense. I mentioned the word coordinate, that before we can coordinate with someone else, we need to find them, right? Now, if I go into the restaurant or the mall or the workplace with, a spouse that's carrying a gun or a friend that's carrying a gun, or I have coworkers that are carrying a gun in an environment, then I already know that I've got this potential asset and this person that I don't want to get into a crossfire with, the person I don't want to, just see a gun going off kind of on the other side of the fake plants in this restaurant and just shoot through the plants, because that may be my friend, that may be my family member over there. But that's part of the coordination, part of knowing that I'm already in this environment. So we say there are 3 C's. All team operations in any of the defensive, tactical training environments, 3 C's. The first C is that coordination. Okay? So the coordination is the plan. It's what are you going to do? All right, we're going to talk about that. The next C is going to be communication, because guess what? You can't always plan for everything. In fact, your plan has to accommodate the fact that there are going to be variables that you have to be able to communicate about. Which direction a bad guy is. The police are coming. I need you to find an exit. I need medical help. There are going to be things we need to communicate, right? And then the last one is cooperation. And the cooperation, for anybody who's been in any kind of a military or law enforcement team environment, you're familiar with this idea of finding work or filling the gaps. In a broader sense, everyone, even if you haven't served, you've probably heard this idea that somebody in a team, in a unit, needs to know the job of the person that's just above them in rank, and the job of the person is just below them in rank, so that if that person is taken out or unable to continue serving, or they aren't there that day, whatever it is, and you need to be able to fill in and do those jobs. Same thing in a CQB environment, it comes up a lot, right? If you're not watching a danger area, you're not going through a door, you're not obligated to do something, you shouldn't just be standing around. You should be figuring out what you can do to help the team. So cooperation is just that, right? You have a plan, there's some communication that's going to be part of your plan, but if all of that's falling apart, you just do what you need to do. You get it done. So you may have the plan that, for example, your 14-year-old kid is going to come to you. If you ever have to pull your gun out and shoot, you've told them, come to me, grab my belt, get behind me and face in the opposite direction. And yet, after you had to defend yourself, you put the gun back, you start assessing, and you notice that they're over there in the corners, they're not doing what the plan was. You're going to communicate to them and say, hey, get over here. And if they're not getting over here, you can't stomp your foot and get mad about it. Eventually, you may just have to go get them. And that way, you're getting back on the plan, which starts with getting together, with getting in contact. This is not a CQB class. We just did one of these classes in northern Italy with the fence training, and those guys are all certified IDS instructors. They had a great group of people come into this class, this two-person armed defense class, who had already been through the fundamentals. And this isn't a shooting class as much as it is a communication, a cooperation, and coordination class. Right? It's about getting together. So if you imagine an environment, where we've got this, restaurant space, and here's the hallway where the restrooms are back here, and then here's the kitchen is going to be back here, and the tables are all over the place in this environment, like this, that kind of situation. All right, so inside of this environment, let me change colors for you when we do this. Inside of this environment, you've got 2 people. You're there with a friend or a family member who's got a firearm, and they get up to go to the bathroom. So we got person number 1 is here, and you're over here at the table, person number 2, and then the bad guy shows up, right? So let's see, do I have any more colors here? Yeah, okay, I've got a color. So I've got bad guy here, and you can't really see that, so that's okay. There's a bad guy over there. We're going to go back to blue, and we'll just make that bad guy. All right, so there's your threat. All right, when that threat shows up, we're not coordinating. We're not taking intersecting fields of fire. In fact, this is a really important lesson, and a very early mentor of mine, that even in a team environment, everyone responds as an individual first, right? And that was mid-90s. He put that seed in my head, and he's right. I don't care how well trained you are. If something happens, you're in an executive protection team, that assault comes, even if you're on this side, of the client, you're supposed to find a place to take them. If there's a shot that goes off over there, you respond first, and we know now react first as an individual human, and then your training might kick in. You realize the rest of the team has a job to do, I have a job to do, and I'm going to take this person with me. So immediately, it doesn't matter whether you have a friend that's armed in the restroom or not, you are going to respond to this threat. And then you're going to come back in and you're going to assess the environment. After you don't see any other immediate threats, nothing other immediate going on, you're going to start thinking to yourself, okay, wait, where's my friend? What's the first part of our plan if we get into this situation where we're both in the same environment? It's to get together. Now, it might mean I'm going to start looking for them, maybe in the direction of the bathroom because I know that's where they went. Maybe it means I'm going to call out to them. Could mean a lot of different things. I might also want to take care of myself first in terms of my assessment and say, I'm better off in this corner because this is an area where I can't get somebody, maybe the patrons from here are going to come up behind me because they thought I was the bad guy, right? Well, if I move myself into this corner over here, I am now in a position of advantage, and I can also keep my eye on where that first threat was, on the front door over here, and I know that my friend may be coming out from the left over here from the restroom. Similarly, my friend, the other person, knows the plan is to get together, right? And maybe their individual training also is high enough so that they know they're not supposed to come out of the bathroom with their gun at extension, right, looking for somebody to shoot just because they heard shots fired, right? So normally we would say, okay, if this is you alone and shots are being fired in the restaurant and you don't have any friends or family here, get out the back door, go out through the kitchen, right? But in this case, we're going to assume, okay, they know that, it's a spouse, family member, coworker, whatever, a friend. I'm not going to abandon them, so I'm going to stay in my staged position and come out and see what's going on, or maybe I'll go to a ready position, a stool or a compressed ready position, and I'm going to move around to get together. Because once I get together, let me clear this, not to make this too crazy. I know sometimes it's hard to see on the video screen depending on what you're watching, but let's just go back to a large room, and we won't worry about even where the doors are at this point. If we are together, right? If I have 1 and 2 together, it's going to be really hard for us to get into a crossfire. It's going to be really hard for us to get separated. It's going to be really easy for us to communicate, at least easier than if we're separated. It's also going to be easy for us to think about medical. It's going to be easy for us to pass a flashlight or a magazine, or if I have a spouse that doesn't carry a gun, but I've got 2 guns on me, all that kind of stuff. All of this starts with get together. And in fact, get together and get back to back. Because now we can lock onto the belt, and one person's in a stage position or a ready position, one-handed, the other person has both hands free, and that also gives us the opportunity as we start to move maybe out of that corner, we're thinking about getting to an exit, it gives us the opportunity to watch in 2 different directions by having ourselves together, right? That means if the police are coming in, from this side, well, now this person's going to be able to see it. If police are coming in from this side, this person's going to be able to see it. If there's another threat, if there's a bystander that needs help, if there's a witness that's getting ready to do something, if somebody doesn't understand that you had to draw your gun and defend yourself and really defend them too, maybe this other person is watching your back and say, hey, it's okay, he's a good guy, we're not a threat to you, and make everything kind of chill out, right? So back-to-back coordination, that's the first part of the plan. From there, the rest of it really becomes about 2 people processing information, communicating, and then continuing to just get the job done, just as you would if you were an individual. So a couple of important pieces there. Fundamentally, have a plan. Talk about this. If you spend time with other armed people, and most of us do, think about the lifestyle, you think about the environments we're in. If you hang out in places where people can carry guns, if you hang out with gun people, if you have family members, coworkers who carry guns, have a plan, talk about what you're going to do, and know that the first piece you need to do is not mistake each other, not get caught in a crossfire, and you're better off being back-to-back. Now, some of the guys with military CQB training are going to say, that's crazy. Why would we do that? Why wouldn't we separate and they dominate the room and all that? It's not what this is. Okay, this isn't SWAT team training. It's not CQB training. It's not husband and wife clearing the house. This is very simply, in the immediate aftermath of a defensive event, getting together. And that's where our 2-person armed defense class gets started. I'm going to take a look at some of the questions we have. There were some really good ones earlier, and we may have some new ones. So let me take a look and see where we are. We've got a good group in here. We've got almost 100 people, which is great for a mid-afternoon event. And let's see. So there's a lot of good questions in here that aren't necessarily related to two-person armed defense or defending other people. We're going to get into defending other people. So, okay, check this out. Bruce asks, what should be said to someone that is threatening me or maybe other people? So let's go into that. So we're going to go back to our second concept. The second concept was I just had to defend myself, and I look over to the left, and there's someone I don't need to shoot immediately, but maybe they do have a gun in their hand. They're not sure what's going on. They look a little confused. Maybe their hand's on their gun in their holster. Right? What am I going to say to them? Well, what I'm going to say to them is really going to depend on a lot of things. Their body language, sort of how their gun handling looks, where the gun is pointed, where their trigger finger is. Right? I may tell someone, hey, stop! Right? I may try to get their attention very specifically and let them know that I see them, that I'm watching them, and they need to stop what they're doing. Right? I may say, don't turn your gun towards me. I may say, keep your gun in the holster. I may be giving orders. On the other hand, as I pointed out earlier, if someone's got their finger on the trigger and they're half extended and they look nervous, the last thing I want to do is yell at them, right? So I may position myself so that I can respond to stop them from, even if it's going to be an accident, I still want to protect myself and protect others. If they're a negligent gun owner who isn't well trained and isn't well disciplined, they're as much a threat to you as someone who's maliciously trying to shoot you if they start firing rounds off. So I may put myself in a position where I'm least likely to have to jump to that conclusion, but also be able to get their attention, right? So maybe, good guy, I'm armed, concealed carry holder, whatever I might say to make an announcement that they may hopefully hear that doesn't seem to be a threat or directed at them. Now, my assumption is that this question is more about someone who's not, we haven't shot anything yet, we haven't shot anybody yet, we haven't had to shoot anybody, but we have someone, let's say someone that, problem is with some of these hypotheticals is they don't really happen this way. But let's just pretend for a second that there's a guy with a knife, 12 feet away, and he's saying, hey, you drop the keys on the ground and get out of here. He wants to steal your car at the gas pump. Okay, well, first of all, if I have family in the car, I'm obviously not going to just drop my keys, or my keys are still in the car, and say, hey, you can have it, buddy, don't worry about it, right? Now, if the car is empty, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I'm just going to get out of there. If I think I can get out of there safely and this guy's going to take my car and go, 10 blocks before the police already know what to look for and what's in the car and what the license plate is and all that stuff, maybe that's the route we're going to go. We're talking about not using a gun to defend property. So let's jump to, I've got family members in the car. I think that's a time when we start thinking about quote-unquote brandishing, right? So if you're able to get your hand to your gun, and at this point you must be committed to drawing the gun and shooting. And this is getting us into shooting in defense of others specifically. So you've got somebody who's approaching your car, maybe you're coming out of the convenience store, you have family members in the car, the gas is pumped, you're about to go up there, take the gas nozzle out and get back in the car and drive on. But as you do, you see a guy with a knife or sharp screwdriver or whatever it is, guy with a hoodie with his hands in his pocket, whatever you want to envision, approaching the car. You think he may be posing a threat. Do I want to pull my gun out and shoot at that point? Probably not. Do I want to go to a ready position? Maybe, but remember, you're now going to be looking on camera and to every other person there, another potential good guy with a gun, like an aggressor, guy with a gun in your hand. So it may be better, again, to go to that staged position, wherever you happen to carry, and then get the guy's attention. Maybe you can light him up with a flashlight. If you carry a flashlight, that'd be great. Like, hey, right? Get his attention, and then tell him, like, hey, you're posing a threat. I think it's really important to articulate that. Because if a guy's like, no, I just wanted to get directions to wherever, you're threatening me. If you continue to threaten me, or you're threatening my family in that car, back away from the car. If you continue to pose a threat, I will defend myself, or I will defend them. Right? I think that's probably the most important thing to say. You think they represent a threat, you articulate that clearly, and then you tell them you're ready to respond to defend yourself or others. I think that's probably the most important thing you can do in that environment. Let's see. Okay, so really good. So Michael asked the question that I think we talked about a little bit there. How do we identify other concealed carry holders during an active shooter? The right person for coordinating those actions. Well, again, I think the key is that we, as a community of 35 million legally armed people in the public space, right, 10% of the U.S. population, legally armed in the public space, potentially, if everybody chooses to carry on any given day, we must think about how we would be identified as someone with a gun. If it's because we're doing this, right, if we're TJ Hookering it around, or Jack Bowering it around, or whatever you're doing, you look like, especially with your finger on the trigger, you look like a threat, right? You look like someone hunting, right? So your job as a concealed carry holder, as a defensive firearms carrier, is not to hunt for bad guys. Even if you're hunting for your family members and environment, you do it like this, in this staged position. If you do have to pull the gun out, then you pull the gun out and you keep it in the compressed ready, or you keep it in a Sool, maybe even a one-handed compressed ready or Sool, where you could keep this hand out, sort of shielding the view, ready to push off anybody who's close, do whatever else you need to do. Obviously, if it's dark, you have the flashlight in this hand, and you're doing that. This is a really good way to not look like a threat, right? Even as a police officer, if I'm on duty, I say to people, if you know, we have a small community where I'm a reserve deputy. If I happen to be on duty and a call comes in for an active shooter around the school, and there's some guy, you know, dressed in whatever you think is a traditional, like, terrorist or active shooter garb, you see him, you shoot him, and then I show up 45 seconds later. If I see you doing this through the school, you look like someone who's about to shoot school kids, right? If I see you doing this, right, this looks like someone who is a good guy, trained good guy with a gun, in a ready position, compressed, looking around the environment. And this person's going to get an extra second or two, some verbal, right? This guy, I can't afford to give you a verbal warning. If there's kids in front of you, I yell at you and you kill a 9-year-old, that's on me. So the first thing we need to do as a community is start thinking about compressed ready positions exclusively, not extended ready positions. Extension is for shooting, and the importance of the staged position. Whenever I talk about home defense or the public space active shooter, I'm going to get my kids on the other side of the theater or the mall, I want to be in this staged position. You'll say, Rob, why would I want to give up my opportunity to shoot the guy faster? Why would I want to delay that response by having the gun still in the holster? I say this very simply. If you don't trust yourself going from the staged position to a shooting position when you're already aware of what's going on, your hand's on the gun, and you're moving forward, very, very alert and aware of your surroundings, if you don't trust yourself to get your gun out and respond if you need to, I don't trust you running around with the gun out of the holster, moving around in a crowd. Make sense? But if you're not trained enough and confident enough that you should be able to respond this way, when you know there are other good guys with guns and police officers in the environment and people looking to tackle the gunman and hit the gunman with blunt objects and throw rocks at the gunman, you know all that's going on. So making yourself look like the gunman seems like a really bad idea. If you can't handle from the holster, I don't want you doing this. Make sense? You got to have the confidence to be able to use the tool appropriately, and you definitely don't want to be mistaken for the bad guy in that environment. Let's see. Concealed carry badge, not a fan, Ross asks. So the problem with the concealed carry badge is I think, and I could be completely wrong, but let me tell you my experience in 20 plus years in the training environment as a student and as an instructor coming up on 20 years, so 30 years plus in the training environment. The people that I have seen with the concealed carry badges, more often than not, fall into the demographic that also seems to think it's their responsibility that if you hear gunshots, 200 yards away, it's to run towards the gunshots, right? That sheepdog mentality. The sheepdog concept makes sense for armed professionals because that's their job. They are separate from the flock, doing a job to protect the flock. We as concealed carriers, we're just, capable rams with sharp hooves and big horns, right? Like we are part of the flock. We're moving, going about our daily business. We're getting sheared. We're eating our hay and grass, and we're moving around and all that stuff. And then every once in a while, when there isn't a sheepdog around to defend us, when that wolf shows up, we might have to, smash it with the horns or kick at it with our hooves or, bite at it if we need to, all right? So that's that concept. If I throw a badge in my pocket and I think that I'm going to be identifying myself as the good guy in that way, there's a mentality issue that I'm concerned about. The other thing is it's just one more thing to worry about. So now I got enough people that tell me, well, I don't even trust myself coming out of the holster. I don't trust myself in a one-handed ready position. I think I'm giving up time if I'm in a compressed ready position, so I really want to be extended. But now we're going to add in, oh yeah, and also I want you to hold this badge and make sure everybody sees that you're a good guy at the same time. So I'm just not a fan of it. Probably the best potential version of that was that little kind of like crossing guard strap, right? Like hall monitor strap that you could theoretically wear in a little pouch on your belt. And in the event of you're an off-duty cop or you're just a concealed carry person or you're a plainclothes security guy, in the event of something happening, you could theoretically like open it up and put it on over your body, or open it up this way and put your arm through it, whatever it was, and now you have this bandolier that says like good guy or legal concealed carry or whatever, but at least it frees up the hands. So I'm not a big fan of the badge. I think it opens up too many opportunities for failure, for, you know, you were impersonating an officer or whatever else could possibly go wrong with that. It's another thing you have to do. If you're wearing it next to your gun, it obviously creates a whole bunch of problems potentially for you. So finding it, deploying it, and communicating, I think you can do that a lot better with your body language and with you know, your other hand motions and everything else. Let's see. All right, so that gets us good. We keep growing in the number of people here, so that's good. Either I'm not losing you guys and you're sharing it with friends, or people are dropping off at a slower rate than people are joining. So now let's get into shooting in defense of others. Shooting in defense of others, like I said, we did a whole DVD on this at one point in the collection, and we've done some pieces. There's been some pieces specifically in terms of active shooter. There's been pieces specifically in terms of being a good Samaritan. So first, that's the first place I want to go in terms of being a good Samaritan. There's a lot of good article material on the Good Samaritan concept. I've also written about it in our blogs. So if you just put Good Samaritan into the search engine, you're probably going to come up with some good material that will go a lot further and deeper than I'm going to cover right now. Legally, it's important to know the laws in the jurisdiction that you're in. Sometimes I say important to know, you hear people say important to know the laws in your home state or where you live. But like for me, I mean, I'm constantly traveling, right? So I need to be aware of what the laws are in different places as well as where I live. And if you travel a lot to one place, you have family in one place, it's different from where you live, you need to know the laws there. And of course that brings us into the should versus could concept. Should versus could, right? This is really big, important concept. We talk about that in a lot of different ways. Should versus could. When we talk about the law, quite often we get caught up in could, right? We hear people ask questions like, when can I use a gun to defend myself? I don't like that terminology. I don't like that mindset. While it is important for you to understand the laws, you're not going to be like looking up code sections in the moment to decide whether or not you can shoot, or decide whether or not you can pull your gun, or decide whether or not you can brandish your gun, for example. The could influences your plan, right? So if you absolutely know that there's a protection that exists in some jurisdictions that says you can take action as if you were the victim. In other words, if that victim could be defending themselves, you could defend them in the same way. So if someone's being attacked lethally with a knife, but you're on the other side of a table, you're on the other side of a counter, and you're 20 feet away, and there's no articulable reason for you, you could not say that was a threat to you, but you can act on the other person's behalf because it was an immediate threat to them, then that gives you the opportunity to legally, and with a good solid legal foundation behind you in the aftermath, use your firearm to defend that person. Now you may decide that regardless of whether or not the law says that you can, quote unquote, do that, you may decide that you should do that anyway, right? And this is a very gray area, obviously at Personal Defense Network, but we never advise you to do things that you know are illegal. I don't ever advise you personally or in any of my professional instructing to do something that you know is illegal specifically, but we also know that there is such a thing as exigent circumstances. And exigent circumstances dictate that regardless of the letter of the law, what you did was still the right thing to do. And in fact, in most cases historically, defensive use of a firearm is considered an exigent circumstance. In other words, there isn't a specifically delineated phrase that says you're allowed to do this because this was happening. It's the totality of the circumstances that are taken into account. So if you come around the corner and you see a 9-year-old kid with a 200-pound dude grabbing him by the arm with a knife in his hand saying, "Come on, let's go, kid." I don't care if it's the kid's uncle, the kid's parent, a human trafficker, whatever it is, big overgrown bully at their school who just happens to have left back a few grades and is a lot bigger than them. You clearly see something that there's almost no plausible, articulable way that isn't a person threatening a kid with a knife and potentially trying to do something that's going to be lethal or permanently damaging. And you, in my mind, would be able to very easily say, I feel like I should do something. All right, so again, we're not talking about overtly ignoring the law. We're talking about being very knowledgeable about what's possible in terms of coming to other people's defense, having a plan built around that, but also understanding that you may be faced with a moment where either you aren't clearly on legal grounds or you don't have time to process the legal grounds and you're instead doing what you believe you should do. And obviously being prepared to deal with the aftermath of that. Once you put the gun on your body, you stage the gun somewhere for defensive use, you have to be planning for what that aftermath is, and you need to be able to articulate why you did what you did. and obviously you felt that you should based on what you perceive to be the situation, that's a good answer in my book. The problem comes when you walk around the corner and you see two people that are of equal size and generally equal ability, not one person on the ground bleeding unconscious with someone still punching them, but two guys sort of squared off, and one guy has a bat in his hand, the other guy has bare hands, and you think, well, the guy with the bat has this lethal tool and the other guy just has bare hands, so I'm going to shoot the guy with the bat. Probably not a good idea. So that's not the kind of situation that we're talking about. You don't really know what was happening before you came around the corner. You don't know if this is an off-duty police officer, one or the other. You don't know if the other person has a knife that you didn't notice. You don't know if the other person had a gun in their belt and said, I'll shoot you, and the person picked up the bat. There's a lot of different variables there at play. So we're going to jump from the when should I, or should I at all think about defending someone else, to specifically the physical issues of shooting in defense of others. Now, the way I'm squared off to the camera right now, you can envision exactly where that high center chest is the way we define it in all of our defensive shooting training. So we talk about a rectangle or an oval or a circle or a square that is basically in this area where I'm moving my hand. It's basically a wide open hand. Anatomically, it is underneath the collarbone, and it comes off the points of the shoulder, so underneath the clavicle and underneath the head. And then we talk about it being about as wide as the nipples, right? So we've got that area, spread out hand in this area, pie plate, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, whatever it is. The problem comes in the idea that, well, yeah, this is a three-dimensional surface and it's three-dimensional person when we're talking about shooting a real person. It doesn't really matter right now. If I stand here like this with a gun in my hand, the two-dimensional image that you have on your screen represents this three-dimensional body well enough. However, when I turn to the side and I start thinking about defending someone else, everything really changes, right? So we start thinking about where would I shoot this person, and this is one of the big technical issues I want to get to today, is where do we even aim? Where are we trying to put those rounds when we're defending someone else who's being shot at over there, or the guy with the knife is coming at them, and you're going to be shooting into this part of the torso instead of coming in through the center, where it really doesn't matter if I'm a three-dimensional mannequin or two-dimensional. We just taped some videos with a tactical 3D, TAT 3D mannequin down at Ancient City Shooting Range, and they're going to be hitting Personal Defense Network soon. But we actually did, and this is the new generation of those targets, but we actually several years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, did a couple of videos with the first generation of those targets, and I specifically talked about how a three-dimensional target is invaluable when it comes to training for shooting in defense of others. One of the pieces that doesn't always get talked about, but is really important to understand, is when we define anatomically where that area is that we're shooting into the torso, it's not just under the head, but it's specifically under where the head connects to the torso, right? So if you think about that, now I'm kind of scrawny, right? So that really doesn't change anything if you're still kind of shooting into the same area. When I drive out like this, if I'm shooting at somebody like this, you think about where the head attaches to the torso. Not necessarily under my head now, because under my head when I'm in this position, well, there's nothing there. But under where the head attaches to the torso into this three-dimensional tube, that's really important. Another thing to think about is if you have somebody that does a lot of bench presses and has a well-developed chest, if you got somebody with a big gut, or somebody just is very rotund in general, if you have a woman with large breasts, if she's attacking someone and you're going to attack them, we want to think about not center of mass, not the middle of the torso in the way this is the middle of the torso. We want to think about under where the head connects to the body. So let's go back to, we got this guy here who's a bad guy, and he is attacking your friend, and he has big chest muscles, right? And he doesn't do a lot of leg work, right? So we got this guy. Well, this guy, when we got him here with his arms extended, he's got the knife, whatever it is, this area is not where I want to shoot, right? I don't want to shoot into the pectoral muscle from the side. If we give him a big belly, right? If you make him kind of a big guy, he's got bigger legs, just a generally big guy. Well, most of that extra weight that people carry, whether it's belly weight or chest weight, you don't see people with like big back muscles putting their head right in the middle of the torso. A lot of this extra stuff out in front is just going to be fat. Maybe you'll get some gut, right? But you're not going to get the internal organs. The internal organs that we're trying to hit up in the high center chest, right? The lungs and the heart, obviously. Think about the spine comes down from the bottom of the skull, right? We got the lungs and the heart set generally far back, right, if we're going to look at this from the average person, especially anybody that has the large muscles, larger breasts, or a larger belly, the good stuff is deeper in, right? A lot of people say, well, why do we need this 12 to 15 inches of penetration in gelatin? Why are we looking for that? Well, it's because when we're looking at someone who isn't, kind of scrawny like me, we got to drive back into where the good stuff is. And this is where the good stuff is. It's further back on the body. So if we just redraw that a little bit cleaner, we got the bad guy here, right? So there's the bad guy. And if his body comes down and he's got either a large chest or a large belly, but his body is straight along the back end, then this is where we're shooting into here, not into the fluff. So if I'm here like this, or if I've got the knife and I'm threatening the person, I don't want to shoot into the center. I still want to shoot below where the head connects to the torso and below the point of the shoulder, right? Even if that means shooting through the arm or into the shoulder to get into the torso, or if the arm's out of the way, shooting into the shoulder still or just below the arm, this is where we want to be, back here, not into the center of mass, which might be further forward. So shooting in defense of others, that's one of the first things we talk about, and that's where a three-dimensional mannequin really helps. The idea of shooting at a piece of paper and skimming across that paper doesn't work as well. Shooting the paper two-dimensional targets front on, no big deal. Almost no value when you're shooting beyond contact distance or retention distance to a three-dimensional target when you're going straight on. From the side, any other angle, shooting in defense of others, there's some big benefit. The other thing is, of course, the head. Now we want to start thinking about where the ear is located, and that's going to give us kind of an index for where we want to put that round. We don't want the round going out here into the face, taking off the bottom of the jaw, coming across the forehead, anything up in here, the soft tissue. We want to be driving back here around where the ear is, and again, that's in this area that's above where the head connects to the body. So you're going to think about that 3-inch circle that we normally put at the top of the nose. We're going to take that 3-inch circle and put it at the top of the ear, and this is where we're going to be, more to the back, and obviously not at the top of the skull. We don't want to change the person's opinion of the color blue. We want to come down here and make it impossible for them to hurt someone else. So some thoughts there on the technical aspects of shooting in defense of others, which is really what I wanted to highlight. Let me go over here and see what we've got as far as questions, because I know we had some that were specifically dealing with this. Approaching 60, the inability to run away effectively. Do I have any suggestions for avoidance while still maintaining protection for my family? So, mobility issues are huge, and whether they're mobility issues due to a temporary injury or a permanent disability, or maybe you're in a wheelchair, maybe it's just we're put on a few pounds, we're not as able to get away or quickly as able to get to a place to help our family. Mobility issues are real. One of the important things I've learned over the years is it's very hard to put out information when it comes to someone who is outside of the kind of the norm, because look at it this way. If we take, here's the entire human population, and 99% of the people that are interested in this information are going to be in that slice of the pie. All right, they're going to be of a certain physical capability, they're going to be of a certain physical strength, a certain mental awareness and alertness, visual capacity, all of that. But that's certainly, and let's say that's 80%. Well, if that's 80% of the population that's coming to our classes or coming to Personal Defense Network, then obviously that's where I start, right? When I show up in the morning, I have this idea in my head of the person, the gun, the attitude, the prior training. I kind of have this vision, and maybe it's different for certain parts of the country, it's different for different countries, it's different if it's a law enforcement class versus a military class versus an executive protection class versus home defense class. 10 years ago, I would not have factored appendix carry into that group, right? Appendix carry would be over here in some kind of an anomaly group, right? Well, now, I don't know, 30 to 40% of some of my classes are carrying in the appendix position. So if that's the case, now all of a sudden I have to include them in a much closer group, or maybe just expand the standard group. If somebody says they have mobility issues, you say you're in a wheelchair, I don't know how much torso movement you have, for example. I don't know if you have full range of motion with your arms. I don't know if you're using a very heavy kind of confined chair, or one a very lightweight, more sporty chair, and you're really nimble with it. You say that you're 60 years old, so now I start to put you in a bracket that says, okay, in a wheelchair, 60 years old, maybe that person fits into this little slice of the pie, right? But there could be somebody else who's 60-year-old with a wheelchair that isn't quite that. They're more like this slice of the pie. So when we start dealing with anybody who radically is away, people are like, I only have one hand. Well, do you have like literally no arm? Do you have, you're missing 3 fingers? Do you have no use of the hand, but you have use of the arm? Do you have no use of the arm at all? Is it amputated from here? You have a stump below the elbow or only above the elbow? There are a lot of different things that come with, I can only use one hand to shoot, right? And there may be some aspects of hand use to stabilize the gun, maybe just pressing against it, that you can do, right? There may be, you may be able to access a magazine, right? Maybe you can't access a magazine. Maybe you have, you know, the thumb and index finger, right? Maybe you don't have the thumb, you only have the index fingers, but you can put back pressure on or put side pressure onto the gun. So when someone tells me that they're disabled and they have a mobility issue, I have to tell you, like, the customization of the information that comes with being in front of me in a class is invaluable. And that's not just me, it could be any instructor that's dealt with people or welcomes people into their class, regardless of where they fit into this you know, pie. Most instructors allow people to come into the class that aren't just the standard demographic. But if someone tells you, oh, you're in a wheelchair, here's what you do, X, Y, Z, my experience is that doesn't always fit for everyone in a wheelchair, because once you come out of the general demographic and the general population, the problems people have are really very personal and specific to their environment. Similarly, if you're in a wheelchair in a rural environment where it's mostly dirt and it's hilly and things like that, you're going to be in a very different mobility situation than if you're in a very urban environment where everything is, you know, paved, cement, hard floors and public spaces, and it's much easier to move around. So I can't give you specific information. What I can tell you is that everyone with mobility issues needs to immediately take that concept of evasion, or take that idea of I'm going to move to protect my family, and immediately sort of put that in the appropriate level of importance or reality, right? Just like, you know, you may hear a story about somebody who pulled out a gun and shot somebody at 100 yards. Just because you carry a gun doesn't mean you should really believe that that's what you should do, is try to shoot someone at 100 yards. In our Platinum class, our Platinum level interactive session earlier today, we talked a lot about that. Knowing when you should be shooting. Because of your previous practice and experience, you should only pull the trigger, obviously, with the expectation of getting a hit in the real world. So if you think about mobility issues and you think about moving to your family or moving away from your family, let's go back to our 2-person armed defense. It probably makes a lot more sense if you have any kind of limited mobility, walker, cane, limp, wheelchair, whatever it is, that your coordination, your first level plan is that your family is going to move to the last location you were at. And you should try to be as close to that location as possible, obviously taking your own safety into account first. If you need to move to a better position, you do that. But the idea of, especially in the chaos of an active shooter, the person with limited mobility trying to find the rest of the family, probably better that your plan starts with stay in the safest place you can relative to the area they last saw you, right? And it's easy to say, you know, set a rally point in computer internet land, but setting a rally point every 5 minutes doesn't make a lot of sense either. So the idea of coordination being you come to me makes a lot more sense. You think about kids in a house, young kids. You're not going to say come to the safe room. You're going to say stay in your bedroom, I'll come to you, and maybe as they get older you'll tell them to lock the door, right? And then maybe you'll have a secret knock or a password or something like that. But generally speaking, if the alarm's going off, don't panic, stay in your room is a much better idea than kids running around the house at a young age, stumbling into the way, stumbling in your way, stumbling into the bad guy, or ending up somewhere where you can't find them. So I look at that similarly with mobility issues. If you know that you can't move quickly and easily and nimbly, probably best to let the family come to you. Let's see, we're coming down to the end of the hour. Let's see what else we got here. The best defensive weapon while driving a car, the car. Is that a trick question? I don't know if that was a trick question. Guessed 695. So if you can use the car as a defensive tool, do it. And a defensive tool could simply be getting away. If you're pinned in the car, there's no doubt, you know, handgun's going to be way better. If you mean inside the car, then, you know, again, your extreme close quarters, shooting while in contact, unarmed skill sets, all those become very important as well. Let's see. Question from YouTube. Man, that's a good picture. Thoughts on cross-section and pelvic shots. Target is smaller, less penetration needed, no arms, shoulders in the way. Now, not a big fan of the you know, shooting into what's called the pelvic girdle as a primary. All right. Now, here's the issue. A lot of people talk about, well, as an alternative target area. So, if I turn sideways and we start thinking about you know, just generally the width of that area, when we look at it from the front, the width should be very similar to the width of the high center chest. But here's the trick. What you're really looking at here is issues of taking away someone's mobility, but not necessarily taking away their ability to fight, and issues of breaking up some of the vascular activity, your veins and arteries in this area, which are very dense as they come down through the area, breaking up the bones, breaking up the structure. Maybe you'll hit the bottom of the spine, take out their mobility, make it impossible mechanically for them to use their leg. But if someone's got a gun and you just drop them to the ground, sure, you're going to affect their ability to fight, but you haven't really potentially stopped them unless you also are going to do that through blood loss. And we know that blood loss takes a certain amount of time. The bigger the vessel that you break open, the better, and the biggest vessels are going to be right up here, including the heart itself and up around the heart. So I'd still rather use this than this as a primary area. So now you start thinking about armor. Okay, so I get it. Somebody has armor. If someone isn't wearing like military grade, latest, greatest armor that is going to really stop, not just stop the bullet, but stop the blunt trauma, the actual effect, because concealable body armor, you get a few multiple shot hits into there, even if the armor is good enough to stop the bullets, you're going to be affecting that person pretty significantly, especially if you're dumping, 8, 9, 10, 12, 9mm rounds into their high center chest. Eventually you may defeat the armor. Of course, you can switch to a headshot if you have that. That's our secondary area. And I would only reserve that lower part of the body, that pelvic girdle area, as a tertiary area, and I wouldn't think of it as a primary area either from the side. Again, if you have a situation where you believe your shots aren't having an effect because of armor, and you were to shift down to that area instead of the head because of a balance of speed and precision issue, too far away for someone to feel confident with a moving head, taking that headshot, but you feel confident shooting into that pelvic area. Remember, it gets a little wider as people are moving. If someone's moving towards someone, then that gives you more to shoot at. Sure, could be a great tertiary option, but I wouldn't think of it as a primary or even a secondary. And remember, the other aspect of defensive shooting, we may or may not be seeing those rounds hit or miss the target, right? So we may not even know where our rounds are going to know whether or not it's an armor issue or a balance of speed and precision issue or a superhuman guy who isn't being affected by your perfect hits issue, or someone is just pushing through it, and if they're going to drop dead in 30 seconds, but they're still shooting at you right now. A lot of reasons why you may not be immediately affecting someone. I'm not a big fan of drills like, the Mozambique, right? 2 to the body, 1 to the head as a standard. If my 2 to the body worked, I don't need to go to the head. If my 2 to the body are working, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 to the body is a good idea. We shouldn't transition targets without having processed information that makes us want to transition. And of course the head moves around a lot, right? So the idea that we're just going to bop, bop, bop like we do on that static target, probably just some range games that we're playing. So keep that in mind. Let's see. As a major trainer, should a standard response between 2-person arm defense be created and taught? Absolutely, and that's why we teach the, I don't know who's asking that, Doug asked that. So yeah, I mean, we developed this 2-person arm defense class that we've been teaching for years. We have a 1-day version that's all live fire out on the range. We prefer that people have trained in the CFS program, the IDS program, or the DSF program, one of the kind of core programs that teaches intuitive shooting, it teaches compressed ready, that teaches reloading from the compressed ready, and kind of all your gun handling back here, that you've already been introduced to the staged position, that you've been introduced to reacting and then drawing the response if you're training from the holster. We prefer that someone already has that background before they come into our 2-person arm defense class, and you can look for that under the acronym of TPAD. In fact, if you look at the hashtag, if you just go to any of the social media and search the hashtag TPAD, or you look at any of our course schedules or my social media, IC Training Company, the IC Training Discussion Group, TPAD is 2-person arm defense, and that's the coursework. It was designed specifically to address this issue of other good guys in the area, whether they're someone you know, or particularly that stranger who you don't want to shoot them, you don't need to shoot them, but you also don't want to get hurt by them. So one of the things I say to the students, and when you come, you come with the coworkers, best friend, brother, sister, husband, wife, whatever, father, son, very early in the day we start pairing you up with other people and mixing the partners up, because we want you to be able to apply this to anybody you find in the public space who's a good guy, and honestly be able to recruit someone to help you even if they don't have a gun, just to be eyes, ears, like that, maybe a flashlight, whatever it is. So we stress this importance of this coursework, and that's why we developed the program. We also have a 2-day version that's only taught at select locations where we can do non-lethal training ammunition powered force-on-force scenarios, and Reno Guns and Range runs that program pretty regularly. They have some certified instructors by IC Training Company that run the course, and I do that at least once a year there as well. out in Reno, Nevada. So absolutely, Douglas, that's the whole point, is this isn't just about a few random tips. This really is a program that pulls from CQB, it pulls from executive protection, it pulls from shooting in defense of others, pulls from a lot of different areas to give people some very basic and fundamental concepts that they can apply, especially if they've thought about them ahead of time and even kind of, you know, role-played, scenarioed, simulated, or even just talked through the concepts with those coworkers, family members, or friends who carry guns and are often with you in the public space. Let me give one last look to the questions here. We are right there at 1 hour. So I appreciate you tuning in. I was kind of non-stop, fired up. I just got back from IWA, the International Trade Show, kind of European version of SHOT Show. I had a great time out there, a lot of great American companies and international collaborators there. Hit the ground late Monday. Yesterday kind of took a down day. We had the cyclone snow bomb here in Denver, and it literally lived in Colorado since 2002, and it's the worst storm I've seen on the front slope here, as far as the front range in Denver area for sure. And it was pretty serious, so I just kind of hunkered down and hung out here at the Western headquarters, the remote studio, which gave me some time to get my thoughts together, extra time about what I wanted to tell you guys about today. So I didn't get to plug PDN commercial in the middle there, so let me just do it here at the end. The training tour starts in 2 weeks. The training tab, if we go back to, we'll shrink this back down, whoops, get rid of that. My super smart screen that I have to be smart enough to use. If we go back here to the training tab, that's where you're going to learn about the training tour, and again, that's going to be updated with the 2019 information. If you go to the videos tab, you're going to start with all videos, and these you can go to newest videos. You can do a lot of different things there as far as what you want to see. And articles as well. You can get into the article zone. Online classes through PDN Academy. The blog has a lot of frequent updates. We've got some contributions from William April. We pull a lot of stories from the news for you to think about and comment on. You know, this happened in Alabama, what would you have done? And that's a lot of, you know, kind of Monday morning quarterbacking opportunity to think, well, that person may have done well, a person may have not done well, but more importantly, what lessons can I learn and what can I plan on doing in the future, whether it's the same, better, or just different because you're in a different set of circumstances when you're in the public space from what you see pulled from those public files. So personaldefensenetwork.com. You can follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, follow us Facebook, interact with us. Consider premium membership, gold membership, or platinum level membership for all the things that come with those different opportunities. And of course, if nothing else, just sign up for the free newsletter and get alerted whenever we're going to do one of these PDN lives. And that includes Gear Talk and Training Talk. And Training Talk, of course, Derek Poole and Barrett Kendrick took over the helm of Training Talk. So we ran for 3 years with Grant Cunningham, longtime contributor and collaborator in the training industry. We now have new hosts on that show, so if you've seen the show in the past and you haven't got a chance to check out the new format and the new style that those two guys are bringing to Training Talk Live PDN, this will be twice a month. The first show aired last week, so that's in the archives on the blog also. Check that out. And I will see you in April for the next PDN Live. Thanks.